Hi everybody, thank you all for tuning into my Q&A video. I appreciate everybody who posted questions, and there were a couple of repeats, but I'm going to enter even the repeats into the drawing. So thanks all so much for the support, and without further ado, let's get started with the actual questions. Didush2401 asks, how old are you and what is your current occupation? Well, I'm 24, I'll be 25 very shortly, coming February, and my field's psychology, and I specialized in substance abuse problems and addictions specifically. What I actually do for work, I work third shift in a group home that houses usually 12 people, male and female, who are chronically homeless. They have difficulties with substance abuse problems and usually mental health components as well, so I deal with a lot of people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and stuff like that. But because it's third shift, most of the time I'm playing RuneScape at work, so don't tell my boss. The next question came from several people. How old were you when you first started playing RuneScape? And have you always played consistently or just on and off? And for the last question, did you start with RuneScape Classic or with RuneScape 2? So I started playing when I was 13 years old. I lived in Florida at the time, and my family moved very, very frequently, usually multiple times per school year, so it was really difficult to make and then hold down friends. So a couple of my friends in Florida introduced me to RuneScape, and I got hooked right away because it was a really easy way to make and sustain friendships, even though I was moving around the country a lot. That was 12 years ago, and I've been playing really consistently ever since, though when I was a child, because RuneScape was like my go-to thing, anytime my parents needed to punish me for anything, I would have some arbitrary length of time that I couldn't play RuneScape as my punishment. So yeah, I started right back in RuneScape Classic really shortly after RuneScape was released, and I've been playing pretty much on and off since then. DDude715 asks, what are your favorite and least favorite updates? My favorite update is a really, really tough call because I really like a lot of the updates that I've experienced. I've been here since pretty much the beginning. But if I had to pin down one, I would say probably Slayer. I was really excited when that skill came out, and it has been my favorite skill ever since. As for least favorite updates, definitely has to be the Squeal of Fortune, and I guess the month following when they made spins buyable. It's just, I don't agree with it on a principled kind of basis, and I feel like the promos are just getting more and more out of hand, and they start to suffocate the normal content that most of the people actually play the game for. But it's gotten to the point where I can just kind of ignore it, and even though it's really, really in your face all the time, I do my best to avoid it, and I don't really participate. Osiris Queen asks, how long does it take to reach the final boss title? In terms of real lifetime, it mostly depends on how you play. The actual time input's not really bad. Mostly the major contributions come from the fight kiln, which takes about 50 hours to get the 100 kill count. The raids, which one raid is about 30 to 45 minutes, so for 100 raids you're talking close to 75 hours. And Virago, which you can get maybe 5 kills an hour max if you can get a really consistent team going, which is going to take you about 20 hours. Other than that, you can really crank out most of them very, very quickly, so the time input isn't too severe. Alex Forwood asks, what's your advice for aspiring YouTubers? Is there anything they should buy before starting? Yes, one thing, and it's something that I didn't really think about when I started because I was mostly just screwing around. This was just something fun to do. But you really, really need a good microphone, and because technology has advanced so much, a good quality microphone is really inexpensive. You can get one for $30 to $50. But I was using this really, really cheap, crummy headset when I started, and the audio quality was just cancerous, and it made watching my videos like torture. So you really, really need to have that. People need to be able to hear that there's a person behind the camera who's doing stuff. So anybody out there who is making YouTube videos without any kind of dialogue whatsoever, or using a really, really shitty quality microphone so that just listening to it gives you cancer, you're really not going to accumulate any kind of interest in your channel, even if your content is really good, just because it's so torturous trying to watch or listen to it. Grinning Reaper asks, when was RuneScape the most fun for you? That's a tough question because it has been fun for me really the whole time. When I started, I was like 13 years old and I was just this mindless child. And I spend most of my time killing cows to just quickly surpass my friends in combat, and I got all kinds of fulfillment out of being the best amongst my friends in terms of total levels and everything. But even up to this day, I have some of these amazing friendships, some people that I've known for more than 10 years online, and I really can't pinpoint a specific time that I had the most fun in RuneScape. I've just been enjoying it the whole time. Nico4021 asks, how has your YouTube career impacted on your daily life and your economy? The answer is not much. I still have a full-time job, so I don't do this for work. I actually haven't even partnered with YouTube, so I don't make any money from this. Mostly because I don't really want to force ads down you guys' throats all the time. And the viewership on my videos is so insignificant that I might make like $200 or $300 a year or something. And so for all the extra effort that I'd have to go through with filing my taxes and everything, it's really not worth it for me to put you guys through the extra ads, to make a tiny bit extra money, to then have to file more significant tax effort and all sorts of things like that. And because I only do one video a week usually, it really doesn't impact my day-to-day life much. I usually do those on the weekends while my wife's asleep or working or something, and they're pretty short because my editing isn't really professional. I'm not particularly good at it, so I can usually throw a video together in 2 or 3 hours, depending on how much of the conceptual work I've done thinking about it beforehand. RSRBY asks, how long did it take to do all the requirements for the Master Quest Cape? That I really can't answer, because I've always been one of these people who goes for the whole idea of like true trim, where even after the completionist cape there's these completable tasks that you can only do one time that really should be included on the requirements list of the completionist cape, or the trim completionist cape I should say, and I've always wanted to do them. So things like the Last Rider's Journals, the God Wars Dungeon lore, all of the post-quest things that aren't included on the trim completionist cape, I had really already done over the course of the last several years. So when they announced that the Master Quest Cape was coming out, there were really only a few things that I just didn't know about that I had to do, and the total effort of doing that wasn't particularly serious, though the Ripper Demon lore was problematic because I accidentally went several thousand kill count without reading one of the lore books, which made me not eligible to receive the next one. So even though there's only 6 of them and there's supposed to be a 1 in 100 drop rate, it took me about 2,500 kill count to get all of them. So in total, I devoted about 20 or 30 hours to finishing up the tasks that I hadn't finished already. Apollo asks, do you think the emote for the Master Quest Cape could have been better? Yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they just recycled the emote from the regular Quest Cape. So obviously it could have been better, and no matter what amazing emote they made, it could have potentially been better. But I think the Master Quest Cape project was a single JMod project. ModManty, I think, worked on it by himself because it was such a requested thing from players. And as far as I know, ModManty is not an animator, so since he's working on this by himself, it's worth forgiving him that it's just a recycled emote, because he just wanted to make sure that this content was out there for the players that wanted it, even though there wasn't a team to devote to this subject. And Angel Love 2093 asks, are you ever going to release any series on your YouTube channel? Well, I've tried to do a couple of series. I did a series on hunting the Insane Final Boss title, but because of the rarity of everything that's required for it, it's not really a series in the conventional sense where you would have like a weekly update or something like that. So I definitely will try to do something like that in the future. I've heard that they are looking at reducing the rarity of the Kethsi outfit scrolls from Rune Dragons, and since that's kind of a completionist thing, I'm definitely interested in doing that if they make it more reasonable. So I'll probably do a series video on that. But as far as the YouTube channel is concerned, I'm really interested in what you guys want to see. If you want to see like a generic progress video series or something, or like some arbitrary road to a full set of God Wars Dungeon things like RuneShark did, or anything like that, I am absolutely open to ideas. I really want to provide you guys with what you are interested in seeing. That makes me happy. So let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for videos or video series or anything that you want to see. Aeolon R asks, what is your most memorable moment in RuneScape 3? I would have to say getting the trimmed completionist cape, because I did it before all of the different nerfs to the Castle Wars requirement, and so I spent the greater part of a year doing Castle Wars, and so when the moment finally came about, there was such anticipation for it that it was just really satisfying, and so many people congratulating me, because at the time trim was not as common as it is today. I was the 181st person to get the trimmed completionist cape. Now there's over 1,000 because of all the different nerfs to the Castle Wars requirement, but it was a very, very satisfying achievement at the time. Dusk of Dawn 23 asks, what were your top 3 favorite requirements for obtaining the trimmed completionist cape? Does not need to be on the trim list specifically. Well, the first is the quests, absolutely. I really love all of the quests, aside from a few select ones like the Elemental Workshop quests, which have puzzles that have no explanation and require you to just kind of fumble around in the dark until you get it right. But the actual story quests are really, really satisfying. I find some of them to be better than most Hollywood movies these days. And on that same note, all of the lore collection stuff and reading the lore, and the same goes for the Master Quest Cape, it's really great reading some of the story that Matt Osborne and the lore team craft. It's really awesome. And then, I guess in the same sense, I really enjoyed the Fremennik sagas as well, especially the Thok ones, because there is absolutely nothing funnier I have ever experienced in my entire life than the Thok sagas. They are absolutely perfection. Marius Poe asks, how much is your wealth? Well, in total, my bank is about 5 Bill GP. Quincy asks, do you plan on expanding your DPS action bars for specific bosses, such as how you set up a bar for KK, Nex, Virago, Araxor, etc.? Well, first of all, KK, Nex, and Araxor, I would really just use the same bars, with the only exception being at Araxor I like to put prayers on the bar somewhere so that I can use a keybind to prayer switch for phase 4. Virago is a different example. I may do a perfect rotations for Virago, especially for P5 and maybe for hard mode as well for P10 and P11, because there's a lot of different things that interrupt your ability to do DPS because of team splits or reflex and things like that. So there may be a possibility that I'll do those in the future, but at the same time, there are so many different rotations at Virago. There's maybe 12 different iterations of P10 and P11, that the amount of time that would be required to do that would be very, very significant. I would probably spend several months working on that. So I wouldn't expect that in the near future. I will continue to work on the DPS series guides so that you can apply those to bosses in general, and you should be able to get really good results at Virago, even with just what I've shown you so far. But it's a possibility. Sams250 asks, what's your favorite boss in game and why? Mine personally shifts, but at the moment it's either Yakamaru or Virago. I really love raids right now, but I think my favorite has to be Araxor, and the reason for that is that Araxor is really the boss that took me from being a mediocre PVMer to being pretty good. Because it's a solo boss, I was able to spend a lot of time just kind of YOLOing it and running in and figuring out what the hell I was doing, and I improved really, really dramatically just by doing that, and conceptually speaking and lore-wise and just aesthetically, everything about Araxor I find very, very appealing, so that's definitely my favorite. T and Crumpets RS says, tell us your most embarrassing story. I'm going to assume that means RuneScape related, so probably my most embarrassing moment is way back when I had just started and I was about 13 years old, and the old classic scam at the time was that you would say, I'm doubling items, I'm duplicating items, so just give me an item and I will duplicate it and I will give you back 2 of that item. And there's similar scams today. But 13-year-old me saw a guy who was doing that, and I was relatively wealthy at the time in context because things were not so heavily inflated as they are now, and I thought, I'm going to be a good guy, and I'm going to say, look, I know you're a scammer, I know you're probably trying to make some money for whatever it is you want, I'll give you like 50k, and you stop scamming people. And so he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so I gave him 50k, and 2 seconds later, he's scamming again obviously, because he's a scammer, and 13-year-old me didn't have the cognitive capacity to predict that that was going to happen, even as obvious as that was, even though moments after it happened, I was like, duh, of course he would do that. Tannis5313 asks, being a Master Quest Cape holder, what was your favorite piece of content related to getting the cape, whether it's a quest, a mini quest, or so on? I'm gonna say the Majorat Quest series, because I really love the lore surrounding the Majorat and Zeros in particular, and how that's all tying together with the progress of RuneScape in the 6th Age, and I know this is all kind of lore nerd stuff, but I really find them to be the most entertaining quests, even though they're not really funny. The story's really intricate, and I honestly think there's really good potential to make like a super cool film about this or something. No Lifer on Bike Crash asks, what was your goal in RuneScape when you started to play? Well, I was 13. I didn't really have any kind of foresight, so the first thing I did was camp out at the Lumbridge cow pen for like 3 weeks and just train up to like level 60 in all my combat stats. I really didn't think about anything. I really didn't have any kind of a plan for my account at the time. Angels Die 2 asks, what keeps you motivated playing even after trimming? Well, first of all, there's tons and tons of completionist style things that aren't required for the trimmed completionist cape, which is mostly what I work on. I'm doing the Insane Final Boss right now. I need Vitalis and Balmy to get that. The Kethti outfit scrolls, as of right now, are something that could potentially occupy me for several years, though it looks like they are reducing the rarity of those. And really, there's an almost endless supply of those kinds of things. But really, the reason that I play RuneScape is mostly just because of the social aspects of it. Completing little menial tasks isn't really entertaining on its own, but I have really great friends, like I said earlier, that I love to come and hang out. And even if I got completely bored with RuneScape, I would probably lobby sit just to talk to people. Too Much Noise RS asks, since you have Trim and Master Quest Cape, what achievement did you hate the most of all the requirements? As far as Trim's concerned, probably the Livid Farm spells, even though that's a requirement for the regular completionist cape. That is just the most tedious and monotonous thing you could ever think of. As for the Master Quest cape, I have to say the Ripper Demon lore for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Normally it wouldn't be a difficult thing, but because of my stupid oversight, I spent a way longer time there than I needed to, and I really burned myself out for those mobs for a very long time. Anthanese asks, what comes next? What are your plans for near and distant future RS? Well, what I'm working on right now is mostly I'm just camping at Virago. I'm trying to get the Vitalis pet and Balmy so that I get the Insane Final Boss. Distant future, really, I'm just going to keep pursuing completionist style things, like all 120 skills and things like that. So really, I could occupy myself for a very long time just with those things. Ho-Sun Lee asks, you're very close to unlocking/experiencing every single piece of content in the game. What is your plan from now on? Well, this ties very closely with the last question, and honestly, I'm not very close at all, especially with like 120 capes and everything being completable. There's definitely several years more worth of things for me to do, and also the fact that they keep adding new stuff. There's really just going to be an endless supply, I think, and that's probably going to keep me entertained for the long term. Minna asks, what do you plan on doing in the near future with this channel? Expanding to different games or just RS3? If I decided to make YouTube videos for different games, I definitely wouldn't put it on this same channel because I think it just gets easier to navigate if I would separate it into different channels. I don't really have any intentions to do that, especially whereas this isn't like this isn't a monetary thing for me. So I mostly do RuneScape videos because I find RuneScape to be entertaining, and most of the other games that I play are like a solo type thing. So I really don't expect to be making videos for other types of games anytime soon. Sam Dean asks, how did you get into bossing? I find them really overwhelming and so struggle to learn the techniques. Well, my first experience with real bossing came before the evolution of combat. I had to learn how to do QBD for the lore journal drops for the Trimmed Completionist Cape. And QBD was much more difficult before the EOC came out. It's been significantly nerfed, and now it's more of like a mid-level thing, but at the time it was the hardest boss that was in-game. And I mostly just kind of trial and errored my way to learning how to do that. in my experience, there's really two types of people and how they learn when it comes to bossing. And one type, it's much easier for them to go on YouTube and find a guide and to watch the guide, and then they can employ that really quickly and learn very quickly. And the other type really can't learn from guides at all, in my experience, and the only way that they learn is to kind of just go and screw up over and over and over until they figure out how to do it for themselves. I'm a little bit of both, but I think you should definitely try and figure out which of those two types of people you are, because if, for example, you need to be one of those people that needs to learn for yourself, one of the best things that you could do, like if you're trying to learn Virago, for example, just go to like Rago PVM or some mass FC, where you can just kind of get in for these minimal requirements and no experience and just kind of YOLO it. And I think you'll find really good results doing that. Damon asks, will you ever do a Nex guide of your own? Probably, yeah. I thought about this a little bit, and I was deliberating on it because I'm not the best at Nex, and there are much better Nex guides on YouTube, which is not something that I normally say about guides. But particularly Evil Lucario, I don't know if he has an actual guide out, but he does have a lot of videos of different Nex skills, and he is absolutely astoundingly better than I am at Nex. And so I didn't want to put a guide video out and be pushing techniques or skills that were subpar for Nex, because I definitely don't want to be teaching you guys the wrong way to do stuff. But I think I've learned a lot from his videos, and now with the release of the Defenders, when I go and try to get the tier 80 Defenders, I probably will record some footage and make a Nex guide with a few different techniques, because I do some things different than other people do, and I have had a request for a Nex solo guide specifically for being able to use a Nile Familiar instead of a Yak, so I will probably get that sometime within the next month or two. WillowFan01 asks, what new content coming out next year are you most looking forward to? Well, two things. First, Invention. I'm a little skeptical of Invention because it has a lot of potential to be a really awesome and amazing skill that's going to make PVM very, very different and probably much more versatile if they do it properly, but there's also a lot of risk if they don't do it correctly, and it could just become this awful, grindy train thing that is just not going to be fun. It's going to empty my bank account and not be pleasant to do at all. And the second thing that I'm excited about is definitely the third raid boss. Probably much more excited than I am about Invention, because the first two raid bosses were very, very satisfying in terms of PVM, and I'm definitely excited to see where they go with it, and also what new loot they incorporate, because they said they wanted to fill out the tier 90 weapon sets. So for example, if the new raid boss drops a tier 90 spear, that's going to revolutionize Corporeal Beast, and there's all sorts of different things that we could do with that, so I am excited to see where that goes. Greg R. asks, what is your most memorable moment while playing? That's a tough one, and I think I've almost answered this question previously when I talked about the Trim Completion Escape being my favorite achievement in RuneScape 3. But if I wanted to pick a different most memorable moment, it had to be when Mod Daeshun used to guest in the Shaky Friends chat from the high level forums all the time before he quit and moved on to different things. He and I became really good friends. He was a guitar player, and I'm a guitar player, and we also both liked classical guitar, which is not something that's very common in today's day and age. And at one point, he said I was a pro for playing RuneScape at work, and that has been my favorite screenshot this whole time. I use it on my channel in a couple of places, and honestly, I just really miss him. He was a great JMod, and he was very reliable for keeping community stuff on track, so cheers, Daeshun. Why It's Just Me asks, as someone who has not seen any of your videos yet, what would you say makes you stand out? Well, I think my guides, really. I have a lot of experience with math and science, and I think because of that I can really break down enemy mechanics and stuff in terms of equations behind EOC to make it really simple for people who maybe don't have that same amount of experience, or who can't work out how to do good DPS on their own, for example, or who struggle with Araxor mechanics. And I'm also really an effective communicator, in my opinion, so I'm able to get all that information out in a video in a way that I think makes sense logically and is very consistent, and so I think people get much better results from my guides than from other people's guides. SODBWKW asks, how do you feel about elitists? Well, I feel two ways about elitists. First of all, I think there's two kinds of elitist, and the first kind of elitist is a person who suffers from what people who would be educated in psychology know of as the Dunning-Kruger effect. And to simplify the Dunning-Kruger effect, basically people who don't have a lot of skill tend to overestimate how skilled they are, and people who are very skilled tend to underestimate how skilled they are. So, for example, a person like Malordo-Z or Wooks might be someone who would frequently say, well, what I do isn't really that hard. But your average idiot who can't even get a successful duo or Raxor kill, for example, might be like, yeah, I'm so great, man. I'm like the best PVMer there is. 1v1 me. And in my experience, a lot of elitists are like that, and I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to have someone who is incredibly cocky and in your face about how amazing they are, only to watch them fail into oblivion at some really, really simple tasks. Like, this happens to me a lot, especially at Yakamaru. And the other type of elitists are people who really are very skilled, and they know it, and they act like it. And this is also really frustrating for me because, in my opinion, RuneScape's supposed to be an MMORPG. You know, we're a big community, and I don't want to be part of a community where there's this group of people who are skilled, and their only focus is demeaning the other players who don't have skills. I want to be part of a community where people who have skills are trying to help out people who don't have skills, because if you're compassionate and you're willing to help people learn, they can be as good as or better than you very, very quickly because they have your help. And it's this old adage of the student surpassing the teacher, and that really gets overlooked a lot. And that's a big reason why I make all these guides on YouTube, because the DPS things especially, a lot of people weren't doing good DPS, and the only reason they weren't doing good DPS is because they didn't know how. And so all it takes is for one person to show you how to do it, and all of a sudden you're as good as everybody else, and there's no reason for elitists to not be able to do that, and rather to just be like, oh, you're slug DPS, man. So I definitely want to be one of those people who's compassionate and helps out the people who don't know how to do it yet, because the truth is, I was in that position one time. I once didn't know how to do a Raxor, and I had to learn how to do a Raxor, and now I want to be one of those people who can teach other people how to do a Raxor and continue that chain on. Look It's Mystic asks, what was your inspiration to start making videos, especially your guides? Normally I wouldn't want to talk about this, but because he recently stopped making videos, I feel like it might be acceptable for me to say now. A friend of mine, his name is Chris, Rich Mellow Funshine in-game, was just learning how to do PVM, and he was basically where I was several years before he was. He was brand new to PVM. He had no advanced motor skills or anything like that that you can employ to do really well at complicated bosses, and he wanted to learn how to do Araxor. So I was like, well, I'll find you a good guide, because I knew how to do it at that time, and I was like, I'll make sure that the guide's good. And I went and I looked around, and I could not find a single good guide. There were a couple that could probably drag you through a kill, like Smokey had a guide at the time showing you how to just kind of trudge your way through a kill with no armor, but it just involved like chugging brews all the time. And then I found what was probably the most popular Araxor guide on YouTube, which was by Munkles Unky. And I really love Munkles Unky's videos, especially the top 10 ones. He's got a really great personality, and his videos are very entertaining. But his guide videos, especially when it comes to PVM, are really, really, really poor. He failed at a lot of the very important mechanics at Araxor. He misunderstood a lot of what you're supposed to be doing, and his recommendations for behaviors and gears were completely off. And I honestly felt very bad, because the amount of views on the video, if I remember correctly, there were hundreds of thousands. And it was like, all these people are getting the wrong idea of how to do a Raxor. So I wanted to get a channel up, and I was like, well, I'll upload guides once in a while to bosses so that people can actually get the right idea and do them properly. And then it just kind of evolved into a hobby. And now I really just enjoy getting feedback so much from you guys that I've been able to help you, that it just drives me to keep doing more and more of it. Matthew Pearson asks, what was your vision for your account that kept you going through the rough times you've experienced? What was your drive? First of all, nice last name, dude. That's my last name. I love it. Secondly, I really never had a vision for my account, especially when I was younger. periodically I would come up with a goal, but I'm a little bit OCD about my goals. So when I set a goal, I really only work on that goal until it's finished. So I never had this really long-term vision. What really was driving me to keep playing is always really just the people. I've said it several times in this video already, but the friends that I've made just draw me back over and over. Even times like when the Squeal of Fortune came out, when I'm just like, oh, fuck this game, I never want to play this game. I can't, give up my friends like that. So it's always the people, and for that I thank all of you guys. Josh C. asks, if you remember, what order did you max your skills? Well, I definitely don't remember. Cooking was my first one because it was a cheap and an easy one. And my last was Hunter, and then a little while after I got Max Cape, Divination came out, and so I had to max Divination, which technically would be my last. But in the middle, I really, really don't remember. I probably did most combat stats first, and then I ended up doing the Shattered Heart minigame for the Strange Rocks before getting most of my 99s, and I got most of them as a consequence of that because I did anticipate wanting to get the Completionist Cape before I actually maxed. Scapers R Us asks, how did you get started on YouTube? How long did it take to get 100 subs, 500, 1000, etc.? Well, I already explained how I got started on YouTube with the Munklezunky thing. It took me almost 5 months to get 100 subs, and I think that mostly comes down to I was really an amateur when I started. Like I said previously, my mic quality was very bad. I didn't even want to listen to my own videos, and I definitely don't blame anybody else for wanting to. But once I got the better microphone, and especially once I got the Araxor guide up, people responded very, very positively to that. And the Araxor guide really just made my subscriber list take off. And then, again, when I got the first of the DPS guides out, a friend of mine posted it on Reddit, and that made my subscriber count explode again because people were very, very excited about that. I guess that's really not something that you can find on YouTube anywhere. And so it took me about 5 months to get 100, and then a little over a year for 1000. Scarbuckle asks, any intention on making more boss guides? They've all seemed very in-depth. Well, thank you. That's what I'm aiming for. I really hope that with my boss guides, with one watch, maybe a couple times if there's a ton of mechanics, that you really understand everything that there is to know about the boss. And that's what brought me to YouTube in the first place, was so many guides that just skipped mechanics or didn't even talk about them. Will I be making more boss guides? Absolutely. My Beastmaster guides are all outdated, mostly because the first one came out in just within a week of release, and then the solo base tanking thing was with walking, which got patched. So I do intend to make basically a full raid guide. I will do another one for tanking at Beastmaster and at Yakamaru, and then just kind of like a general Beastmaster and Yakamaru guide. I intend to make an X guide like I've talked about previously. I will probably make some specific Virago guides, probably just for bomb tanking, because that's the difficult role, and I think there are better guides out there already for the easier roles and for Virago in general. And definitely, if any more bosses come out, I will get in on that very quickly, because I think really quick early guides really mean a lot to people, so that they can get into really early content as soon as possible. Waynehead asks, your voice is great. Do you do any voice exercises? Well, thank you. I've actually heard that weirdly often. About 30 or 40 different people since I have made this YouTube channel have said that my voice is really great, or super sexy, no homo, which I find very strange. I think I sound kind of like a normal guy, but previously I have done a lot of different voice exercises because I liked singing. I play guitar, and singing pretty naturally goes together with playing guitar, but I haven't done them for a while. I got discouraged from singing because my upper register was very, very nasally because I had an obstruction in my nostrils. I don't know how much you guys know about nasal anatomy, but there's the septum, which goes down the middle, and mine was severely deviated, which almost completely blocked off one nostril. And then there are these bony structures on the outside that were a little bit larger than they should be, and they were also blocking passage, so I didn't get much airflow through my nose. I actually had surgery to correct this about 2 weeks ago, so I may get back into singing and doing vocal exercises, but it's really been several years since I did that, so I think this the voice that I have now, that everybody loves so much for whatever reason, is just my natural voice. Noobscape asks, what is the most fun/memorable thing you have done to someone on RuneScape? I have one really great story, and this requires a lot of back information. I was in a clan. This is probably the later half of 2011, maybe mid-2012, and there was one other person who was going for the Trimmed Completionist Cape in the clan, and I was going for it at that time too, and his name was Futon Dragon, and I believe he's recently changed his name to just Futon. And he was a very nice guy, and me and him got along great. And then the Evolution of Combat came out, and at this point, I believe I'd already gotten the Trimmed Completionist Cape, and he was just working on getting comp, so he had very, very, very few requirements left for comp. But if any of you guys remember, with the Evolution of Combat, a ton of different requirements got bugged, there were all kinds of problems, and the bug that Futon encountered was with the Thok Saga, the second one, I believe, where you're required to do like a kill challenge with Marmaros, and you only get your fists, but because of the way they rebalanced fist damage versus weapon damage, it was absolutely impossible to win. So everybody posted a bunch of bug reports, obviously, and JMods got back and were like, yeah, we're working on a fix, and it'll probably be January or sometime. And at this point, it was probably late November or early December. But Futon had some kind of a psychotic break or something. So he would complain about this constantly. He spammed every relevant forum on the RuneScape official forums with hundreds and hundreds of different threads. Completionist Cape is a discontinued item. Jagex is bailing ship as RuneScape dies, and all sorts of like psychotic shit. And it got really, really irritating. So eventually, one day he was just complaining about it again in the clan chat, and it had only been like 4 days, and there was already a confirmed release date for the bug fix and everything, and I was just like, dude, chill, it's coming, January 27th, it's coming, like, and he freaked. So he quit the clan, and I believe he went and joined Max. And everybody in the clan was just like, what just happened? That guy went so nuts. And then later on, I was hanging out at Castle Wars, and I met this guy named Cranberry, and we were just chatting. And he's like, oh, this new guy just joined my clan, and he is the most annoying person I have ever met. Literally, he is updating us on his Trimmed Completionist Cape progress. He's working on Champion Scrolls, and he updates us every 50 kills. And I'm like, oh shit, that's irritating. That reminds me of this guy named Futon Dragon, and he's like, it's Futon Dragon. So I was like, that is hilarious. And he's like, you know what? He's doing the Hobgoblin Champion Scroll right now in the Wilderness. You should go kill him. And I was like, alright. So I logged onto a second account, and I went out and I killed him. And this is pretty early EOC, so he's got full rune on, and he's got an Abyssal Whip, and for God knows what reason, he's wearing Glaven boots, and at the time, these are like 20 mil. So he dies, and at the time, you lost everything on death, so I got these Glaven boots, and I'm like, what the hell are you wearing Glaven boots for? This is like a huge portion of money. It was like inhibiting how much damage you were doing to hobgoblins. It made absolutely no sense. So he went back and he hopped worlds, and then Cranberry was like, oh, he's on world 57 now, so I went to world 57 and I killed him again, and he started to freak out, and obviously, I mean, he's getting trolled pretty hard at this point, and I'm having a really great time. And he turns his private messaging off, thinking that somebody's stalking him through PM, and Cranberry keeps telling me what world he's on, so I kill him 3 or 4 more times. He leaves the clan chat temporarily because he's worried that somebody in the clan is tracking him. Cranberry goes on the RuneScape website and goes to the clan interface to find out what world he's on. This has actually been patched since then, but you could essentially permanently track somebody. So I kill him 3 or 4 more times, and eventually he goes to a hobgoblin location that's not inside the wilderness. And I found him, and I was like, you want your Glaven boots back? I'm just trying to have fun, you know. Because of how rude you were to everyone, I figured I would troll you a little bit. And he was like, no, I don't want him, screw you. And we haven't really talked since. I did a raid with him somewhat recently, and everybody on his raid team seemed to hate him too. But honestly, he's a pretty nice guy, and he seems to have mellowed out mostly since then, so I really wish him well, and you can have the Glaven boots back anytime you want. Imena asks, what do you plan to do video making wise in the coming years? Well, since my biggest strength, I think, is guide videos, it's probably what I'm going to focus on. Obviously, I keep updating on meta completionist stuff, mostly because it works as like a self-diary so that I can keep track of stuff that I've already done, because if it doesn't tick off for like a completionist cape or trim requirement, it's pretty easy to forget how many different ones there are when there's hundreds and hundreds of different things. But I'm really going to focus on guides. There's more bosses coming out, and there's a ton of bosses that I haven't covered yet. The DPS for Dummies series is going to continue, and it's also going to branch off into like a tanking for dummies kind of series, so that you can learn the basics of being a tank and hopefully apply that to being base at raids and for basing and bombing at Virago and things like that. And other than that, really, I'm looking for feedback from you guys. I want to know what you want to see. Most of what I want to do on YouTube is to just provide you guys with what you want to see so that you can enjoy it, and I really have fun making these videos, and I want you guys to have fun watching them. So if you have ideas or anything, let me know. I'm up for anything. Finally, for our last question, Inanimate asks, June, why doesn't your wife play? You've made such a good starting account for her, albeit the name blows right now, but you can fix that soon, right? Yes, I can fix it soon. The name was just kind of teasing an FC member for some silly stuff that happened the other day, but I can change that back on December 20th, which is like a week away. And to actually answer the question, I got a couple special guests. This is my dog, Riley, and this is my wife, Elizabeth. So, why don't you play?
Mainly because I don't have the time to. I do a lot of other hobbies, and I don't know, I just don't really have time for gaming. Even console gaming I don't play very often, but it's kind of just a time thing.
We do have this like really long backlog of classic games that she's never played, and we're trying to work our way through them, but she really doesn't have a lot of free time. So we just recently finished BioShock, which obviously is like years and years old, and we played the 3 of those and had a great time. We've been playing Morrowind. She played Final Fantasy VII, but she hasn't played 8 or 9 or 10 or any of those. She played Oblivion. She played Skyrim. She hasn't played Kingdoms of Amalur, and that's not to say anything about some of the recent games that have come out, like Destiny or something that neither of us have played. So, anyway, with that said, time to do the actual drawing. Here's a slip of paper with everybody's question on it. Babe, would you mix those up and then just pick out 2? Thank you very much. Our first winner is Dusk of Dawn 23, and our second winner is Nico4021. So congratulations, guys. I will be getting in touch with you on YouTube or Reddit, depending on where these questions came from, but I will track you down. You guys get 50 mil each. Thanks again, everybody, for posting your questions, your comments, and everything, for all the feedback on this channel. It has really been a great time. I've enjoyed making videos for all of you, and cheers.